Okay, all fixed. Ready to go.
Good.
Yep, there was a carpet issue. We've resolved it.
Okay.
Does that mean it's working?
I think we're pretty much loaded.
QR code seems like.
I like to watch your face.
Oh, yeah. It could be mesmerizing, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so you think it's good? Am I starting, or are you gonna start like usual?
All right. Thank you, everyone who stuck around. Everybody who is new here, welcome. We're the Consummate Athlete Podcast, joined by Reid Coolsaet, two-time Olympic marathoner, personal best 2 hours and 10 minutes. 14-time Canadian champion. Oh my gosh, I feel like reading this is just like ridiculous. And now you're doing ultra marathons, and you have been for the last couple of years. Reid, welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, first let's just start with the easy question. Why switch to trail running?
Well, the main reason is I just love trail running. So even as a marathoner, I would say 80% of my runs were in the trails. I didn't really know what trail running was because the trails in Hamilton are pretty manicured. Like if anybody's run Sulphur Springs here, they know they're pretty flowy. They're not that technical. So when I did get into trail running, it was a bit of an eye opener, and there's a lot to learn. But yeah, I just always liked running the trails. And then on top of that, I wasn't getting any faster in the marathon, and so I just didn't want to compare my times. It was just easier to run the trails where times don't matter. Pace doesn't really matter so much, and it was a new skill to learn too. So when I moved from the track to the marathon, it was really fun to do a whole new event, and I wanted that sort of invigoration again, and that sort of like that feeling of I'm doing something new and I'm learning new things all the time, and the trails offered that to me.
Okay, and so I'm really curious, we love to know about the training and what goes into it. So I'm curious, you were a marathoner, Olympic level. What changed when you became an elite level trail runner? Like, what's different in your training?
Not that much change in the beginning, and that was probably a mistake. But as I did more races and learned where my weaknesses were, my training did change. So one thing that I even learned this year was just the importance of getting a lot of vert. So it could be going up and down a really steep hill just over and over again. And I think when I first started trail running, I wouldn't have done that run because the pace was so slow. I would have looked at my watch and been, I'm not gonna average 9 minutes per K. That seems really slow. But it's still a really tough run if you're just going up and down a very steep hill. But what your muscles get in the stimulus from going down really steep, and also just like figuring out where to put your feet and how to like move fast going down a steep hill. You can translate that to like a medium hill. You get a lot of confidence, but also a lot of strength from that. So there's been a lot of little things like that have been different. Of course, the bulk of training is just doing a lot of running, and that hasn't changed. Getting fit is still sort of doing a lot of work in a certain effort or heart rate zone. When I was training for the marathon, it would be very pace specific because I was always running on a flat road pretty much, or if it was a hilly road, it was very, very little hills, which I thought was hilly, but I could always just calculate, okay, it's a little rolly, it's going to be a bit slower, but it was always smooth and flat. So it wasn't like the terrain that you get in the trails, but the bulk of running is going to be slow. So you run a ton hard, but you run a lot more slow, and that's still the same.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm a mountain bike coach, so that's actually one of the things we change when I have people coming to gravel or to mountain bike is we start saying, okay, get rid of the speed, get rid of the distance, and we actually do start tracking ascent. So is that something you've changed where you're actually like looking at that after the run or during the run, the total ascent? Yeah.
So some of my runs, I'm not trying to go for distance at all. I'm totally going for the amount of meters up, right? So the amount of the ascent, right? So there's a run that I'll do by my house where I will try to get, either 800 meters, 1,000 meters, 1,200 meters. And I try to allot myself enough time to do that.
Right.
But I'm not even really going off of time as much, except other than just trying to fit stuff in my life. I can't be out there for 2.5 hours. But yeah, distance and pace is irrelevant on those training runs.
Sure, I love it. So different focuses for different runs, which keeps it fresh too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you've won the QMT 110K. You've done Western States. Both of those runs. Actually, I'm not sure if the 110 does it start with a ridiculous hill, the same as the 80K does at. Okay, so races that start with a really brutal ascent, because we are on the eve of Summit 700 here, which also starts with a brutal ascent. What's your tip for approaching that in a race? Because I think that's what the audience here really would like to know.
Okay, and I've said this before, but I don't think anybody is going to regret going out slow on that first hill. But there will be people tomorrow who will regret going out too fast on that first hill. So if you're unsure of how how to approach that first hill, err on the side of going out slow. There's a lot of time in the race that you can make up if you did go out too slow, but you probably still won't. But if you go out too fast, you're going to be paying for it for the rest of that race, whether it be the 5, 10, or the 21K. If you go up too hard on an uphill, you're going to overheat quite a bit, and you're also going to kickstart, especially for the 21K, you're going to kickstart your metabolism, where you're going to be sort of burning a lot more glycogen than you need to be. And both of those, getting too hot and your glycogen just burning at a higher rate, you can't just slow down a little bit and have that stuff come back to normal. It takes a while, so it's better just not to go there and creep it up along the way. So there's a lot of running to be done tomorrow. You're not going to win. You're not even going to have your best race if you crush that hill. And if you're doing the 21K, you're going to go up the hill. I mean, not the same one, but the same elevation 3 times. If you want to go up fast, you can do it on the second and third one.
I like that. And so now, sort of a follow-up to that, you did this 110 kilometer. You've also done Western States, which is altitude, heat, and 100 miles. So in something like that, there's lots of big hills, there's lots of racing to be had over the course of the day. Would you use a heart rate, or how do you gauge your effort coming from marathon where it was so precise, I imagine, the pace you were holding? What do you do in something like these trail marathons where you're trying to pace yourself? Yeah,
really good question. So I don't really rely on heart rate because for a few reasons. So, Western States, at some point I'm probably taking a lot of caffeine. That's going to spike my heart rate. It was really hot. That's going to make your heart rate a little higher as well. And I just don't like to be bogged down by metrics when I'm out there racing. So I really just go by rate of perceived exertion. So I'm just trying to listen to my breathing rate and kind of just check in with myself to make sure that does this pace seem sustainable, which is really hard. And for me, it was a 19-hour race. When you're 5 hours in, you're trying to extrapolate another 10 plus hours of racing. Is this sustainable? It's I didn't really quite have my pulse on that, but and hence why I pretty much walked the last 30K. But for most races that are going to be less than 4 hours, you can once an hour goes by, you can have a pretty good judge. As long as you're fueling properly, then you will have the energy to keep on going and push that pace that does feel sustainable.
Okay, I love it. You've mentioned fueling a couple times. What is your strategy tomorrow?
Well, I'm not racing, but if I were to race, I would be running. I would be trying to get in. If I thought I was going to run under 2 hours, I'd be aiming for about 60 grams of carbs an hour. If I was out there for 3 hours, I would probably go a bit higher, and as well as just making sure I'm taking in enough fluids as well. If it's going to be hot, normally in July it is pretty hot. You want to make sure that your stomach can take in the fuel. You don't want to be dehydrated, first of all, but also you want your stomach to be in a position that it can absorb the fuel that you're giving it, whether it be gels or bananas, sandwiches, whatever it is. Your stomach's got to be in a isotonic state, so it's got to have electrolytes and water in there to really finish the race. If you're going to be out there for over 2 hours, you're not going to have. You can't carbo load your way through that. You're gonna have to take something during the race.
I love that. Was that a big shift for you from marathon, like the just over 2 hour effort, to 19 plus hours? How did you train your gut when you shifted to trail running?
That would have been one of the biggest learning curves for sure. At the time, I was sponsored by Endurance Tap, and for a marathon of 2 hours and 10 minutes, or even like whatever 2:15 or something, in there.
Delicious.
Yeah, I take maple syrup. It's great. Then my first ultra was 110K. Also not recommended. You can ease up into that distance, but it was a weird time during the pandemic, and there weren't a lot of bibs available. So probably around 6 hours, I just got completely sick of maple syrup. Not surprising. Maybe I was surprised at the time, but when I look back, I'm like, obviously not surprising. I got sick of just taking maple syrup for 6 hours. And yeah, it all came up after an aid station, when I also had this brilliant idea of like, if I'm going to take fluids, I might as well just get in a ton of carbs too. So I think I was chugging a bunch of Coke and Pepsi or something like that in Quebec. So I puked it all up and basically had to walk for the next 3K, just get my stomach settled again. The course was so technical, I don't know if I really lost any time walking versus if I had tried running. So yeah, it was like every step I was like learning something. But what I came to learn, especially the first 2 ultras that I did, was that I needed solid food in my stomach to not bonk. Some of the advice I got from some really good ultra runners who won Western States only using liquids was that they were able to do that and feel great the whole time. You can win Western States. That left me often feeling really hungry, just doing liquids like gels and drinks, and talking to a really good sports nutritionist. That sense, a really hungry stomach can send signals to your brain saying, you are not getting enough fuel, you will have to stop. So that's basically what was happening. And after a few ultras of learning, I started taking some solid foods, whether it be bananas or chews, and that works a lot better for me. So it feels like I'm actually eating something, and when you're running slower in an ultra, you can take stuff like that, whereas I never would have thought about having a banana during a marathon, or taking a quesadilla during a marathon. I don't even think it's an option at the aid stations, right? But I found myself, drinking chicken noodle soup or something, right?
I think that's really cool to like hear that you're learning, and which keeps it fun, right? But it's that realization that we're all learning and about our bodies and these different disciplines and events and environments even that we're in, which is really neat. So thanks for sharing that. Did you find? I think I just heard on the Western States broadcast, we were watching the whole race. Did anyone here watch Western States on the? Okay, we have a couple in the back. I'm not just making that up. There's at least a couple in the back. I saw like the vomiting or throwing up in an ultra is like a rite of passage. So you got that out of the way early, and a lot of people can't give up after that. So it was pretty cool. Like, did you have to talk yourself back into racing again after that happened?
I think I was really, really motivated to finish it.
Because you were winning at that point.
I was not.
Oh.
I actually had gone off course early on. I got a lot of rite of passage on that first one. I got lost.
You got lost. Nice. Quesadillas.
Yeah. So I found myself on a 100-mile course. So I didn't think I was on the right course, but I kept on seeing the orange flags. And I trusted the orange flags more than I trusted my brain that I was not on the course. But by a certain point, I realized I was lost. So I was still chasing. So I still had that motivation to sort of try to get to. And I think I was in 4th place then. So there weren't that many runners in front of me. But I really wanted to run 100K. And I figured once I got to 100K, I was going to get to the end. So that was my main motivation. So, and that's why I walked. And I knew that if I didn't get my stomach settled and be able to take on more carbs, that I wasn't going to finish. And so at that point, it was really about just settling my stomach to finish the race. Walking, I didn't think I was going to eventually win. I kind of, at that point, was like, I know I could catch these guys if I felt good, but I don't feel good.
I think that's good. We talk about it's always worth trying to finish, right? Which is hard when you've now won, or you're maybe chasing like a best time, or like Molly's racing and she's won the Summit 700. Actually, she's won it before, so tomorrow there's an expectation there, but it may not go well.
Who has that expectation?
I have that expectation. Biggest fan, but it's tough, right? But these days happen, right? Where we're off our game. You've had it with the marathon. It would have been very hard, right? So I guess, is there any, if someone's having a bad day like that, again, they're off their time or they just didn't feel as well, like how have you got through? You did a 2:10 one time, like I imagine there was a couple you didn't do 2:10. How do you again keep going?
Yeah, great question. So I guess I always think I hope for the best but expect the worst. So you have to expect especially in an ultra, you have to do a lot of problem solving. In a marathon, it's not really problem solving. It's more of just digging deep to make sure you're still motivated for your B goal, maybe your C goal, hopefully not your D goal, kind of like along the way, but staying motivated. The year I finished 9th at Boston, all my goals went out the window. It was the rainy year, and people were dropping out left, right, and center. I didn't know that. I wanted to drop out, but I knew the fastest way to get to the finish line and get warm was to just finish. And so at that point, I was like, okay, let's just finish. I crossed the line. I didn't even inquire about my place because I thought it was going to be so bad, and it wasn't. Quite a while later that I heard I was 9th, and I was really happy with that. I was like, top 10 at Boston, that's great. It was so far out. So sometimes, even if your goals have gone out the window, it's still worth finishing. As long as it's not an injury, you don't want to obviously injure yourself, but as far as just feeling the discomfort or whatever, if you don't finish the race and you're not injured, you're probably gonna just wish you had finished it anyways.
That's great advice. Yeah, I love that. Sort of A goal, B goal, C goal is a good way to think about it.
Seagulls.
Yeah, we always joke with seagulls. Yeah.
Find it really
it's
funny.
An okay joke. We might have made a T-shirt about it too.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I really actually wanted to talk to you about for tomorrow is descending, because we talk so much effort and time is spent thinking about the climbing in these races. You approach Western States, it's all about that first big climb, the first few miles. But there's a half marathon downhill in Western States. Tomorrow, yes, you're going up 3 times. You're also coming down 3 times. And if it rains tonight, it's going to be a really fun 3 times down. So what did you learn about descending when you started trail running?
Descending's been my my Achilles heel. It's been the most challenging part of trail running for me to be competitive has been descending by far. Most of the ultras that I found myself in, Western States included, if I'm looking at splits throughout the race, I'm not running that much slower. I'm kind of right up there with the top few guys on the uphills, and on the downhills, I am far, far down. So the main thing I would say with tomorrow is don't trash your legs on the downhill. And for some people, that might mean going really fast, because then you're not putting the brakes on. If you have that ability to just go for it and let your legs spin freely, and it's very quick, ground contact time. You're leaning into it, and you're taking small steps, but just really quick. That's the best way to downhill. I can't do that. I try to, but no, I can't do it on something like Blue Mountain, where it's quite steep and technical. And so if it's a really long race, if I try to go down at medium, I'm basically just I'm trying to go fast, but really every step I'm putting the brakes on, and I'm much better off taking small steps and taking it slow and not getting that eccentric contraction every single time. So it's a bit hard to do. If you get really comfortable, you can bomb down those hills with less damage than going down medium. So you really just have to find what you're comfortable with and what doesn't feel that hard, because although running uphill does feel a lot harder, you're out of breath a bit more, the downhills will destroy your legs more for the rest of the race.
I think that's great, and probably relates back to, I guess, one of our first questions and ideas was that sort of just you are looking at vert and getting onto specific terrain for some of your workouts as well, right? So what comes up must come down in your workouts.
Yeah, and on my runs, I will go at that medium pace on the downhill because I don't care. I want my legs to feel really tired and to get that stimulus and hopefully build some muscle up. So I do that like stupid pace and kind of like try to go fast, but I'm not quite there yet.
I have actually found downhill intervals are something I've started doing more, and it's like a weird mind thing too, because then you have to go up to get down. So suddenly you start seeing the up as the recovery section. So it actually also helps the ups, because now you're like, oh, this is the easy part. This is great.
I don't know if everyone's going to believe that, but yeah.
No, it still sucks.
Okay, we're down to our last couple here. So earlier in the earlier part of the podcast tonight, there was some mention sort of related to that, but sort of like ankles, rolling ankles. I'm curious, coming out of marathoning, road running, there isn't really a lot of that. Have you had problems with, like, you mentioned Achilles tendon or Achilles heel. Have you had trouble with like rolling your ankles and rock gardens and these sort of things?
Yeah, I did in the beginning. The first year I was riding ultras, I was trying a bunch of different shoes, and there were some brands that were pretty unstable. Hence why I got to Salomon.
Thank you for the Salomon booth here tonight and hosting this podcast.
And so yeah, I found that the foam that they use is a nice combination of being cushioned enough without being too rocky. Like maybe the Salomon road shoe, if you took that onto the trails, you'd be treacherous. So that's been one thing. And the other thing too is I started taping my ankles as well. And I tried for about over a year to get good at technical running, and I made incremental gains. And then I started taping my ankles, and I made huge gains overnight because I just had way more confidence knowing that I pretty much, well, if you tape them right, you pretty much can't twist them. Like you won't go over. So and even to the point where I did twist it quite heavily once, and the tape ripped, which is fine because it's better than my tendons and ligaments ripping. And so even though the tape ripped and I wasn't injured at all. So actually, it's kind of a hack and kind of like a cheat code, but it works the best.
I've heard of people do it. Now, is that like a kinesiology tape or like a Leuco tape, or what do you use?
Yeah, so it's Leuco tape.
Okay,
yeah,
so a stiffer tape.
It's got to be a very stiff tape. I've seen people do it with like a KT tape or something like that. They'll put like a bunch of strips on it.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that well, but some people use that. It would help a bit. I find the neoprene ankle things you get, they're pretty much useless, and they kind of make your shoe fit weird. And then there's like the rigid plastic ones that don't even really fit in shoes. So Leuco tapes, it's thin, and it's like if you were to put 3 strips on it, you'd be like indestructible.
Okay, there you go. Are you sponsored by Leuco tape?
No,
okay.
No, I buy them.
But they could call him right now.
But yes, if they're watching.
Actually, that brings up the topic of cross training, whether it's like strength or mobility or like actual other sports. So talk to us about when you were, marathon running versus now. Like what did you do and what do you do?
Yeah, so when I was marathoning, I did a bit of pool running, also because during that time, it was before I had kids, and so I could just go to the pool in the middle of the day and just, do this extra things. I don't have as much time anymore. And with marathon running, I think you had to run a lot more. With trail running, I think get on the bike can actually be quite beneficial. Obviously, you're biking up a hill, you're really using your quads, and also just getting out there for a long time. So, if you can't just go and do a 5-hour run every weekend, or even a 3-hour run a long time. But like if you do a 3-hour ride, at least like mentally you can get out there for a long time. You can kind of like, you're burning calories the whole time, but you're not killing your legs the same way as you would running.
Yeah, we love that. With this right up our alley is this cross training idea. So
we
love
also
that.
have a T-shirt for that.
Yes. Yes.
Actually, you just said something I wanted to double click on here. You mentioned when you were marathon training, you were running a lot more. I assume your volume did not like 4x when you went from 26.2 to 100 miles. Talk to me about training volume from like marathon to when you were doing the ultras.
Yeah, so my volume actually went down a bit.
Hilarious. I love
But
it.
that's not... Okay, if everything had been the same in my life, it probably would have been about the same, or maybe even gone up a little bit. Not necessarily kilometers. That probably wouldn't have gone up because you're running in trails now, but just the time, like a training week, it would have gone up if everything had been the same. But for most of my career, I didn't have kids, and I was a full-time runner, which is a completely different... It's completely different than having kids and having a job. So you can't really compare it. But I think there's going to be a running volume that's going to be the best for a certain athlete. And I think I was kind of maximizing that for many years of marathon running. I don't think I would have done much more, even if I had the time, just because I think it would have led to burnout.
Yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about that today because Peter did like a 10-mile trail run today, and he's like, I don't know how people do 100-mile training weeks. This is impossible. And I was like, well, most of them aren't doing 10 miles on. They're not doing 100 miles on the trail. Like that takes a lot longer than like 100 miles of road running. Okay, I think this is one of our last questions here. A lot of people here are going to be on the start line tomorrow morning. Best advice for race day nerves?
I like to embrace them. A long time ago, I won't tell the whole story, but for track purposes, I just had to do a race just to get a mark, and so I wasn't actually racing like hard. So I had no reason to be nervous. I just literally had to finish a 1 kilometer race just to be eligible for something else. I got on the line and I was nervous. And I realized it was just because I'm just so accustomed to being nervous. And that was in university. And since then, I just realized I wake up in the morning, I know I'm going to get to the start line in a few hours, and I'm eating my race meal, and I hear an announcer this morning versus just being out there on my own or with some training partners, and there's music playing, there's a bunch of people, and I put a bib on my singlet. I'm going to be nervous no matter what. So I just realized it's just going to be part of it. And I mean, one thing that, if anybody's been injured, you're nervous and you're about to race. I'd much rather be in that position than not there, right? So I just kind of embrace it and just realize it's part of it. I think it does give me a bit of like energy to to get going. And then the other thing that I tell a lot of my athletes is if you're nervous, it means you care, right? Like it would suck to go to a race and have to run 21K on Blue Mountain up and down and not really care about it. So it's kind of like nice that it's like, it means something to you.
I love that. We were at Canadian Track and Field Trials last weekend, and I was covering it, and I found myself getting pre-race nerves, like not even being on the start line, and I was like, oh yeah, this is just how I am. Like this is just who I am as a person, apparently. And that actually, I think, has helped me. I think I'm gonna be okay tomorrow morning. I say that now. 5 minutes before the race, I'm gonna be looking at Caitlin going, why am I here? What am I doing? Why did you tell me to do this? Only because Peter's not there, so I can't yell at him.
Yeah, I think it's why we do it, right? It's you sign up for these things, so it is worth reminding yourself of that. It seems obvious, but yeah, it's like sort of like you signed up for this, right? Yeah. Cool.
I love it. All right, well, I think that's about it. Reid, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right, round of applause for Reid, everybody. And thank you all for hanging out. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
So that was our first ever live First ever live podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. If you if you joined in later and you didn't do the draw yet, so it's like one prize per person, but I think you 3 superstars in the back will have some prizes for you. And good luck to everybody racing tomorrow. Remember, running is fun. That's why we're here. And thank you so much for